Hi, everyone. This is Rico Figliolini. I'm host of Peachtree Corners Live. Appreciate you guys joining us on this live stream. We're streaming, video streaming out of Peachtree Corners, the city of Peachtree Corners. I want to, before we get into it and tonight's guest, I want to just say, be safe out there. Do what you're supposed to be doing. We're supposed to be making sure that we're not putting ourselves out there and letting ourselves be communicable. If you have it, if you don't have it, you don't want to catch it. Coronavirus is a real deadly pandemic, and we should take this serious. And in the coming days, it looks like it's going to be even more serious. In the next 48 hours, we may even see this country locked down to a degree. I mean, they're moving towards that, right? And some of the states have already done it. So sheltering in place in the Northern California, Northern Bay Area for 3 weeks is mandatory, for example. So it's not beyond reason for us to see something like that happen on a national scale, which it probably needs to, because otherwise we're just reinfecting everyone as we cross state lines. So good place to be. So I want to introduce one of our sponsors, Hargrave Fiber. I want to say thank you to them for being a sponsor here. They are the backbone of one of the biggest places and icons in Peachtree Corners, which is Curiosity Lab at Peachtree Corners. It's a 1.5 mile mobile track that is open to anyone to bring in their experiments, their cars, anything that has to deal with mobility, IoT, to be able to use that track in a living lab, 5G enabled, the ability to do your work and discover how your product or service can do really well. So the backbone of that, actually bringing in the internet through for the 5G enabled setup, is Hargrave Fiber. So I just want to do a shout out to them. HargraveFiber.com is where you can find them. So let's get to my guest tonight. We'll bring her right on. There you go. So my guest tonight is Nabilah Islam. She is a candidate for Congress, District 7. A couple of weeks ago, we interviewed Carolyn Bordeaux, and Nabilah Islam is another candidate in that race. So welcome, Nabilah.
Oh, Rico, thank you so much for having me today. I appreciate it.
Sure. Appreciate you coming on, especially with things going on. So how was your day today?
Well, I am being diligent about practicing social distancing, and our campaign suspended all in-person campaigning. So I've just been virtually working with my staff and virtually campaigning and doing this podcast virtually as well. So to be able to communicate with voters and make sure that we're still getting our message out.
Right. Now, you've been involved in campaigns before, you said.
Yes.
What type of campaigns have you been involved in?
I've worked on all sorts of campaigns. I actually got very interested in working on campaigns when, growing up in Gwinnett County, I just felt like I never saw anyone that reflected the diversity of this county or the values that we have. And so I got right out of college, I worked on a city council campaign for a candidate named Andre Dickens. And he was a long shot candidate, and we ran a grassroots campaign, and he was able to overtake an incumbent. And I worked for Jason Carter when he ran for governor back in 2014. And then on a presidential race, I worked for Secretary Clinton when she ran for president. And then most recently, I was at the Democratic National Committee, the DNC, to help rebuild the party after we lost to Donald Trump.
All within the congressional district that you're in now, or in various parts?
In various parts. I did work. My first Democratic campaign was for Pedro Marin, House Democrat. He was at the time the only Latino Democrat in the entire state legislature, and his district had recently been gerrymandered. And we were in fear of losing his seat. And I knocked on doors on his campaign, knocked on over 2,000 doors, and luckily he won his reelection. So I did that, and I also rechartered the Gwinnett County Young Democrats back in 2013. I realized that there wasn't a leadership pipeline for young people to get involved, right. So I opened up that channel. And since then, several people from that group have either gone on to become elected officials themselves, or they have actually managed campaigns. So very proud of that organization.
Cool. So tell us a little bit more about yourself, also personally, a little bit. Where are you from, education-wise, and all that, your heritage, all that?
Sure. So I'm the daughter of working class immigrants from Bangladesh, and so both my parents, moved to this country to seek the American dream. My mother actually grew up in a small village in Bangladesh, in a tin hut home with mud floor, no running water, no electricity, and they worked really hard to give me and my brother a life that they never had. And I attended Gwinnett County schools all my life. I'm a proud Central Gwinnett High School graduate. I actually grew up in Norcross, where one of my mother's first jobs was working at the Hardee's office of Steve Reynolds. So she worked there until I was 5 years old. And she worked at a warehouse for over a decade. And I actually grew up in Lawrenceville, where I mentioned I graduated from Central Gwinnett High School. And I actually went to Georgia State University, got a degree in marketing, and became the first person in my family to graduate from college. And so my family was very education oriented and either wanted me to become a doctor, an engineer, or a lawyer right out of college. And I did none of those things. But I thought it was very important to have a voice at the table and to, jump into political campaigns, because I feel like, that's where so many of the decisions are made that affect our lives on a day-to-day basis. And so I thought that work was very important.
Well, what do you think inspired you to go down that road? Because politics is not, everyone thinks that young people are more politically oriented. To a degree, Sanders certainly thought that, but they're not showing up for his campaign, unfortunately, at least this time around, it seems. So what inspired you? I mean, someone, an event? I mean, what got you there?
I often get asked that question, and I always think back to the time that my mother actually took me to Bangladesh and took me to the village she grew up in when I was 5 and 7 years old. And being such a young child, I grew up in America. I was born in Atlanta, and I had never seen abject poverty like that. And I had cousins who had holes in their clothes. They were taking showers in a dirty water. Their water had arsenic in it. It was a lot for my little childlike mind. And I remember learning at the time that the president of Bangladesh was a Bengali woman that looked like me. And I told my mom when I was a little kid, I was like, when I grow up, I want to be just like her so that I can be able to help poor people. And of course, I can't run for office in Bangladesh because I wasn't born there. But I've carried that on into my life as an adult. And for me, I think it's so important to show compassion, to show love and compassion to your community, and to be there for your neighbor. And that's why I think I've gotten really involved in political campaigns and wanting to make sure that everyone has a voice at the table.
Now, you a lot of your issues that you talk about, or anyone that wants to know more about you can go to NabilahForCongress.com, where they can find the issues that you talk about, and quite a few of them mirror a bit Sanders issues, right? Medicare for all, immigration reform, economic equality. Actually, you believe in the universal basic income, I believe, or no?
I believe right now we need some emergency universal basic income. So families need relief during this coronavirus pandemic.
So what do you think? How do you feel about what's going on now with the legislation that's going through Congress and in the Senate, this relief package of writing a check and making sure it gets out there? Mnuchin kept saying it needs to be out there this week, tomorrow. I mean, they want to be able to send $1,000 to every family, at least every family that's not a millionaire, let's hope, because they don't need the money. What do you feel about that package? Are there specific things in there that you like, that you don't like, that you would do different?
So I've seen various versions of what people have wanted for a relief package. I think that it's the right thing to do to give relief to the American people, especially working people who are suffering from the economic downturn because of this pandemic. So many people are being laid off. They're losing jobs, don't know how they're going to pay their mortgage. They don't know how they're going to pay their health insurance. My own mother was actually laid off 2 days ago from her job. And she called me up saying, Nabilah, I don't know, I don't know how I'm going to survive, basically. And so I think it's the right thing to do to offer relief. Now, if it's $1,000 a month for a working person, I've heard people tell me that, that's not enough. I don't know if my rent is higher than that. And so we're going to have to figure out ways in how we provide relief to people so that they don't have to suffer or go into debt because of this pandemic.
Yeah, I don't know if I think actually, unless I misunderstood, it's just $1,000 check, unless they've changed this. I know Sanders had said that it should be $2,000 a month until we get through this. I don't know if that's a doable thing, but this would be a good enough reason to go further into debt, I would imagine, right? To be able to do that.
I think this pandemic is going to be longer than a month. I think I was listening to actually Governor Cuomo. He did a podcast on the Daily where he seems to think that this pandemic is going to peak in 45 days. It's going to get worse before it gets better. And so I'm afraid that because of our late, figuring out solutions, coming to this problem later in the game is making it so that it's going to take longer for us to recover. So I think families are, unfortunately, probably going to be hurting for more than a month.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, they're even talking about it, possibly even going as far as the effects of it, at least as far as 18 months. There may be waves of it coming back at us, especially when we reopen the borders, if that's the case, and travel begins again. I mean, we may see this come back again, right? Because people coming from different parts of the world, I mean, they may be bringing it with them. I mean, so what about the issue of, in fact, let's talk about a little bit about that, immigration reform, closing the borders, doing different things. I mean, obviously, I'm assuming you're not for what Donald Trump has done. How would you handle that side of it? Because we should have borders, right?
Yes, no, I agree that we should have borders. We're a sovereign nation. Now, as far as now, I saw that we're planning on having here we're asking people that are abroad that are Americans to come home soon. Right. I think that we are going to have to monitor the situation very, very closely in making sure that people that are coming into the country aren't carrying more cases of the coronavirus. And so I saw that they started testing earlier this week in making sure that people didn't have test positive.
Sorry about that, my cat. I had to put it down that way.
I have a cat too.
Do you? Yeah. They could be they like to be around. So one of them might end up walking in front of me, just to let you know. So fine. Immigration, I mean, certainly, being you're running for Congress, you'll be one of hundreds of them. Some of them may be leaving. I mean, there's so many, I don't know how many of them have caught the coronavirus already at this point.
2, I think, 2 or 3.
It seems at least 2, if not 3. And they're, quarantining themselves.
I know we have one in the state legislature.
I'm sorry? I
know that we have one of our state senators has the coronavirus.
Yes, I saw that too. So, I mean, no one's immune to this.
No.
Right? Anyone can get this. Not everyone's going to get really sick from it. Not everyone's going to need a ventilator. I think they said something about 2% of the population that get it may get to that point. It's a possibility. Right? So, I mean, there will be a lot more deaths as we go because, unfortunately, that's the nature of the beast right now. And if we can all just...
No, I was just saying, no, I agree with you. I think what we need to do is ramp up testing. I think a lot of people are carrying the coronavirus and don't know it because they're asymptomatic. Right. And we need to up our testing significantly to identify who has it and who doesn't so that they can properly self-quarantine.
What would you say to the young people out there that are on the Florida beaches? Now, they're not all young down there. They're also, 30s and 40s down there, which could be young, I guess. But what would you say to them?
I would say go home, stay home. I think young people have this notion that they're invincible, that they're young, and what they don't more of these folks need to understand is that you could be carrying this virus, not even knowing it, and passing it on to someone that is elderly,
Right.
whose immune system would be compromised and therefore die.
Right.
That's what we're seeing in Italy, is that 90%, over 95% of the people there that have died from the coronavirus are 60 years or older.
Yeah.
So be mindful of others, please.
Yeah, those Italian, I can say because my heritage is Italian, but they love to kiss and hug, and that's probably how they spread it really fast. All right, let's get on to Medicare for all.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's obviously, you know, one of the comebacks that someone said about Italy is that it's this was Biden in his debate with Bernie Sanders, is that Italy has pretty much Medicare for all, right? Mm-hmm. And yet, their exposure to it was greater than any other Western nation outside, you know, away from China, certainly. So, and the deaths are climbing there. Did it work? Did it not work? Is that even relevant? Is that the same thing, or is it something different?
So I have heard of that, and I will say that it depends where you're implementing the system. Like cultures are different. For example, in Italy, families live together. Right. You live with your parents. There's more density, and so when one person gets sick in the household, it spreads to everyone. And so and then there's an older Italy has the oldest population in Europe, and so I mean it was a perfect storm for that virus to come in and wreak havoc. I think a single payer healthcare system in America would address the fact that so many people that are losing their jobs right now no longer have access to healthcare because they can't afford it, because their health insurance was tied to their employer. This is, you know, people are understanding why this is a problem. And in this district, about 20%, about 130,000 folks don't have healthcare, including myself. And it's particularly dangerous. It's really dangerous now because folks are terrified of getting this virus because yes, testing is free, but like treatment could run up into the thousands. The medical debt, 2/3 of medical debt in this country, people go into debt because 2/3 of it is from medical debt. And so it's a huge issue. And I think Medicare for all would address it.
Do you think
bankrupt? I'm sorry. 2/3 of families go bankrupt because of medical debt. There you go.
Right. All right. Do you think, so, I mean, part of my debate with some people is that there are about 11 or 12 million illegal immigrants in the United States. That number varies quite a bit depending on which side of the aisle you're on and who you are. But we know that there's millions, and certainly probably over 10 million. They are likely don't have enough money to go to the hospital. They are likely will not go to the hospital, especially with what's going on with ICE and all that lately. Especially in states that support that aspect of it. And that I understand is being suspended now. ICE will not do that at this point, supposedly.
I'm gonna have to look at that. I didn't realize they suspended.
They suspended going after immigrants that are not felons, that are not related to arrests like that. So they're not going out searching at this point. At least this is what I understand from CNN. So to some degree, everyone has to verify the facts, I guess. But the fact is that they don't. That's where the problem is too, right? Because if you can't get the test, if you have it and you don't know, and you're not able to go to the hospital, you're spreading it, right? So having a system in place makes sense then, right? I've always argued that, and people always say, especially Republicans might say, well, they're illegals, they shouldn't have it. And I always said, well, then we'll have a pandemic at some point because they will not be able to go to the hospital, right? Makes sense? You have a fear, may not want to be able to go. So there's some of that. Aside from the young people in Florida that just can't get it together and think that they're immortal. Where else can you go with immigration? I mean, at this point, it takes years. I mean, I met someone that his whole family from, I think it was Argentina, they had applied like 9 years ago. And 9 years later, they get the approval to come as a family to the United States. I mean, they had to wait 9 years. Does that make any sense?
No, it doesn't. My mom actually sponsored her older sister and all of my cousins that I saw when I was a little girl in the village. And it took them about 11, 12 years.
Wow.
And so we have a very complicated immigration system. We need to simplify it. Um, Families shouldn't have to wait that long to reunify. Um, I think that, this district is one of the most diverse districts in the country, and Gwinnett itself is
Right.
the fourth most diverse county in the country.
Hmm.
When I talk about immigration reform, I talk about how we need comprehensive immigration reform, how we need a pathway to citizenship for the 11 million undocumented people in this country. We actually have the highest number of DACA recipients in Gwinnett County in the entire state. And so, I believe that these people that grew up just like me, probably came to this country when their parents brought them at 1 or 2. I went to school with a lot of them. I remember, they would, we would talk about how they were going to figure out how they were going to go to college, and like they were just as American as me. And it was just heartbreaking that my life, went a different trajectory than theirs. But I believe that they should be protected and they should have a pathway to citizenship as well. These folks are our neighbors. These folks are, start up small businesses and go to school with our children. So I feel like they should have a pathway to citizenship.
All right. Talking about children and talking about education. I mean, part of what you say is that education, I think, as we all agree, is a great equalizer.
Absolutely.
It puts that benchmark. We're all there. I mean, money does help in many ways. Colleges you attend, whether it's private or public, does help. Being around a different financial level of people does help, right, to a degree. I've heard that all the time. I've heard that, well, and you see it in movies, popular movies too. Harvard. If you attend Harvard, you're expected to start a business, right? If you attend Kennesaw State or GSU, would you say the same thing? So it's,
of course.
Yeah. Right? So, but
I'm an alumni, so I'm going to speak highly.
From which school?
Georgia State University.
There you go. So my son went there also. He commuted. He did his graduate work. Yeah, graduated from there. It's education can be different for different people, right? Because you go, you want to be one thing, you graduate, and then you end up doing something else maybe, and yet you're saddled with the debt of the institution, right? Whether it's $20,000 or it's $100,000. So how would you handle that? I mean, do you believe in free education, state and public schools? Do you believe in forgiveness of debt? And if it's forgiveness of debt, someone has to pay for that, right? Because it just doesn't go away mythically.
Sure.
I mean, right? So tell me.
So, like you said, and I think I put that on my website, is that education is one of the greatest equalizers. And I believe that everyone should be afforded the opportunity to, have a good education. So right now you have a free education from K through 12. I believe that we can make that from K through 16. So yes, I believe that I believe in free college. And I also believe that, we have about 1.4 trillion in student debt. And people are saddled with debt. I myself am saddled with $30,000 in college debt as well. I'm running full time for Congress, so this is literally my full time job. And in order to do it, because running for office is cost prohibitive, it's the system is not really designed for working people to run. And so I put my college loans into forbearance, which basically means that I'm accruing interest, and then I will have to, at the end of my forbearance period, will be paying more. And I think what's happening, I've been talking to my peers, all throughout the district. This is actually a pretty young district. So the average age in Gwinnett is 35. And, they've been telling me that they've been putting off starting, families. So they've been putting off buying homes. And this is not something that's unique here. That's unique. This is something that is affecting, our generation all over the country. With that being said, our government has, spent trillions of dollars. For example, our president spent about $2 trillion for weapons during the time that we were on the maybe on the brink of war with Iran. And if he had instead, he could have used that money to forgive and cancel student debt. So the money is there when it comes for war. I think we need to prioritize the budget and taking care of working people who give so much back to our community.
Now, you talk about forgiveness of debt. I know Bernie talks about that too. I know that back 4 years ago when he ran, I felt the Bernie burn also. Even though I'm a Republican here in the South, I used to be a Democrat up in New York. They say when you get older, you buy a house, you have kids, you become a little bit more conservative and stuff.
Sure.
I didn't really become conservative. I think I just changed my views on some things. But I still do feel about personal responsibility, right? You take out a loan, you should pay the loan. If we forgive those loans and we go and provide free education, there should be certain requirements, right? I mean, I always felt like the Hope Scholarship was great. If you had a 3.0 and you kept that 3.0, you kept the Hope Scholarship. You didn't keep the 3.0, you'd lose it. Made sense to me, right? If you can't do the work, then you might as well not be in school. Would there be requirements in what you're looking at? And would it be a straight forgiveness of debt? Would that be depending on income? What would that be? How would that look?
So ideally, I would love to see a plan where we can finally cancel student debt. And I understand that might take longer. So I've seen, as various presidents have been running on different student loan cancellations on certain amounts that they would, allow to be canceled. I would love to just start the process of being able to forgive student debt, and we could, perhaps prioritize different career paths in doing so. But eventually, I would love to see the ability for the U.S. government to be able to cancel the debt overall.
Okay. With the presidential race going the way it is, I mean, everyone's doing what you're doing, right? They're not. I shouldn't say everyone. I don't know. Most people are not in a stadium. I don't think Donald Trump will be in one soon. I think he's going to do what he's doing away from it. I think he's taking this whole thing seriously as well at this point, hopefully. But who would you support, Biden or Bernie, or whoever the nominee is if you became?
I think whoever the nominee is. I think it's understood at this point that Biden will probably be the likely nominee. And so, I'm going to support whoever the nominee is, vote blue no matter who. With that being said, I am someone who's, like you mentioned earlier, some of my policies do mirror Senator Sanders in the progressive policies that I'm advocating for. But I feel like we need different leadership, and I'm really hopeful that we'll be able to elect a Democratic president.
What are you finding out there when you're campaigning? Obviously you're doing it virtually now. I don't know if you're holding virtual watch parties or whatever you're doing. In fact, what are you doing? How are you doing it virtually? Tell me.
Yeah, let's talk about that. Campaigning during a pandemic is uncharted territory, and it's something that you can't really call up someone and be like, "Hey, what did you do when this happened?" So, I have suspended all in-person campaigning, all in-person canvassing door to door. I just didn't think it was safe for my volunteers or my staff or my community. As this virus is extremely contagious, and deadly. So we are completely virtual now. We operate. I'm doing Google Hangouts with my team every single day. We're doubling down on text banking, phone banking. We're going to have 2 virtual town halls that we're scheduling for next week, so that people can essentially meet me via Skype and be able to ask me any questions that they have. I think nothing can ever replace face-to-face contact.
Sure.
Earning someone's vote and asking for it.
Right.
But I think with people self-quarantining and being home and being on their phones, and there's a lot of anxiety about what's happening, people are paying attention to the news. And I feel we're going to make sure that we're communicating with as many voters as possible.
So the primary has been pushed out, right? It's been pushed to May at this point. And I don't even know if most people understand that the primary that was going to happen this month was really just the presidential primary. the May primary now is going to have the presidential and the local, statewide and local races and all that. I don't know how many people would have known that. Young people might have voted in the primary. They tend not to vote on the local level. They tend to vote more national. But now the opportunity is there to be able to vote down that ticket and go down that ticket in one day and through that. So how, and quite a few people have already done absentee ballot. Now they're going to be allowing that to continue on, and hopefully they don't push the primary out past May, because anything could be possible. And even if they don't, it's going to be long 6-foot apart lines if people go to vote, right?
Right.
Would you encourage people to do absentee ballot? Have you done anything along those lines to help people, to enable that to be easier for people to do?
So as you mentioned, the presidential primary has been moved to May 19th. So we're expecting a much larger turnout with the presidential and all of our down ballot elections. With that being said, I think, I've been telling folks that I really think this pandemic is going to get worse before it gets better. I think it would be irresponsible to ask people to wait in, 3-4 hour lines, crunch together. And, I think that would just be a scenario for just spreading the virus. And so I think, I've been hearing that we'll probably most likely be moving to vote by mail. Now that's nothing permanent, but I feel like a lot of states are moving that way. With that being said, if the state does mail a request, if you want to vote by mail, they need to mail it to everyone, not certain age group,
everyone,
to keep it fair.
Would you say everyone that's registered?
Everyone that's registered, yes.
Right. Okay.
So I've been hearing that, there are thoughts of just sending it to people that are 60 and above. And I think that it should be sent to all registered voters, and so that everyone has the equal opportunity to ask for a ballot and, mail it in.
Right. All right. Cool. Are there any other issues, Nabilah, that you would like to speak about that we haven't touched on?
No, I think we've we touched on I think everything of working class immigrants. And I grew up in Gwinnett County. The majority of my life went to public schools here, worked low wage jobs here, as did my parents. And so, this is a working class district, and I understand the day-to-day issues that people are going through at an intimate level. And I think it's very important that the people that lead us also live among us and understand, our lives. And I also really, truly believe that this is a district that deserves to have reflective representation of our diversity and our values. And that if Democrats want to flip the seat in November, we're going to need a candidate that's exciting, that brings out young voters and brings out minority voters and all sorts of folks, and it has an inspiring message so that people come out and vote. And
cool.
I'm ready to be the voice for this community.
Cool. Then let's end it here. Ask for the vote. You got 1 minute to ask for the vote, and then tell people where they can find more information about you.
Okay. Well, if you're watching this, if you liked what you've heard, I would love to earn your vote. I'd love to be your first congresswoman in this district and flip this district blue and represent it with progressive policies that are going to uplift our families in the working community here. You can learn more about my campaign at my website. It's www.nabilah, that's NABILAH, Congress.com. And I also have a very active social media, so check me out on Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook at Nabilah, FORGA07.
Cool. Stay there for a minute. I just want to sign off with everyone. So I want to thank everyone that's either watching this live or going to end up watching this on during the next 4 days as we boost this out, and that may find this either on YouTube or as a podcast on iHeartRadio, Spotify, wherever you find this. Just rate us on this podcast. If you want to share this, go to the Facebook page of Peachtree Corners Life. If you're not on there now, and you can share this video out to your friends and let them know about this podcast and about the interview that we've done today. So thank you very much, and we'll see you next time.